This is the #1 podcast for real estate brokers and leaders. You're listening to the Philip Gagnon Show.
Hello and welcome to this Thought Thursday segment of the Philip Gagnon Show. I'm Philip Gagnon. Today we're going to be talking about a double-edged sword of recruiting, and that is why agents leave. It's a double-edged sword because we want agents to leave other companies to join ours, but we don't want agents to leave our company and go to other ones, and we don't want to look at it because it's painful sometimes. So at 3 Data Pulse, we've been monitoring agent behaviors and activities for a couple of years now, and the data shows us some very important shifts in their behaviors. And what we've been learning and analyzing this data and agents that leave is that the decision to leave is actually being made further out based on the production of the agent, meaning agents with more production, it's being made further out than agents with less production, which makes sense because if you've got more stuff to move, so to speak, it's going to take longer to move. To look at this concretely, what we're actually seeing is agents that are sort of in the mid to higher tier are sometimes making the decision 5 to 6 months before they make a move. And so you think about how much time you spent with an agent over any 5 to 6 month span, and they could have been considering a move and you wouldn't have even known it. So the question is, why do agents make a move? So I'll tell you a story, and this is really why people make any big changes in their life, and this is the story of the elephant and the rider. So if you picture a giant elephant and there's a small person on the elephant's back that is riding the elephant, that's the rider. Well, inside all of us, we have this elephant and rider sort of dichotomy. The elephant represents our emotions and the rider represents our logic and reasoning. Now, again, if you picture an elephant with a rider on his back, if the elephant and the rider are aligned and they say, we're going to go left, well, then they both go left and there's no problem. And if they decide they both want to go right, well, they're both going to go right. But what happens if the elephant says, I don't want to go left? It doesn't matter how hard the rider pulls on the elephant and tugs and digs his heels in, the elephant's not going to turn left, and there's nothing the rider can do to overcome that. And the elephant's just going to go where he wants to go, which sometimes happens. And the same thing happens with us. So if we make an emotional decision to do something, we'll figure out a way to bring the logic along with us to make the decision. So we're going to examine this in 2 parts, recruiting and retention. So today we're going to focus just on retention, and you should be focused on retention first for a variety of reasons. Ultimately, the reason you should be retention first is because when you recruited the agents that you've got, you made promises to them, you made commitments to them, and you should honor those promises and commitments to help them grow their business and to help them provide for their families, period. And what happens a lot of times when an agent leaves is that there's some expectation that's not met. And a lot of times that expectation gets set in the recruiting appointment or during the recruiting process. And you'll get excited and you'll want to bring this agent over and they're getting excited. And then you start to overpromise and then ultimately you underdeliver. A great example of this is, let's say you meet with an agent and you say, you know what, Mr. Agent, I know you're a $1 million producer right now, but over the last 10 years, we have taken 20 $1 million producers just like you, and we've got them to be $10 million producers in 5 years. So what happens in 5 years when the agent that you recruited doesn't get to 10 million, but he gets to 8? Well, he should be happy because he 8 times his business in 5 years, but he fell short of that expectation, which was 10. Now let's flip it around and let's say you meet with that same agent and say, well, Mr. Agent, we've taken 20 $1 million producers just like you, and in 5 years, we got them to 5 million, 5 times their business in 5 years. How does that sound? Well, what happens when they get to 6 million? They're going to be ecstatic. They're way short of where they could have been with the 8, and they should have been with the 10, but because the expectation was 5, they get to 6, they're ecstatic. Now, the only way to do this effectively is you got to remember what it was that you told them when you met with them. So you got to be tracking your conversations throughout the recruiting process and then into when they come over. So many times companies see recruiting as the end of the relationship. No, it's the beginning of the relationship. This is a relationship business. The recruiting phase is just the start. When they move their license and they agree to come and work for you and that you're going to help them provide for their family, that's the start. You don't stop. That's where you lean in. And you think about how much time you spend chasing agents, you should be spending the same amount of time chasing your existing agents. So you need to be retention first, focus on this first, because the agent's decision to leave is going to be emotionally backed up by financial logic. So let's take that agent that did 8 instead of 10. After 5 years, they're going to say, I was lied to. This wasn't true. They told me I was going to make 10. I made 8. Granted, I did 8 times what I was doing 5 years ago, but I'm only doing 8. And now they're going to start looking at other companies. And then they're going to see some other company that's going to give them a better split. And they're going to say, not only should I leave this company, but now I need to go join this company because I'm going to make more money doing the same amount of business. So even if I do 8 million again next year, I'm going to put more money in my pocket because of the split. Now, if you hate having split conversations with your existing agents, this is why they're happening, is because there is an expectation that you set forth or that they understood, because it happens both ways. There was an expectation that you set forth or that they understood that is ultimately not met. That causes them an emotional distress, an emotional pain. They feel cheated, lied to, whatever you want to call it. And then they start looking and then they find the financial option that makes sense. And then they leave. Now, this emotional decision is not a snap thing. This happens over a period of months and months and months. So when I said earlier that the data from 3 Data Pulse is showing us agents are shifting the behavior 5 and 6 months out, you can still save them in that 5 to 6 months. But what happens is that these things start to compound, and then they start looking for the outrage, and they start looking to be upset, and they start looking to be let down by the missed expectations to further the emotional pull away from the company. So now they need even less logic to back it up because the emotional pull, the elephant is literally galloping away. You can't catch him at that point. So I'd like to tell you a story about an agent and a manager that I had been doing some work with. I'd been working with the manager, now with the agent. I was working with the manager and working with them on recruitment. They shared with me that this agent was sort of a fan of theirs and liked what they were doing and liked the motivation and inspiration and marketing and all of this kind of stuff, and that the agent wanted to come work with this manager. So I sat with the manager and I said, okay, clearly the emotional decision to leave has already been made. So what we need to do now is figure out how we make this logically make sense to them so that they can go home to their spouse and they can tell their spouse why this is a good idea for them to leave. And then ultimately they can make the move, because there's always other parties. You know, when an agent leaves, there's always other parties that are involved. It could be, a parent, a sibling, a cousin, a mentor, a spouse, whatever it is. There's always other people involved. So the agent makes this emotional decision to leave, say, I want to come work with you because I like you. I think we're a good fit. I like working with you. Now we need to figure out what it is that's going to make sense. So I worked with the manager and said, you got to ask a lot of questions. You got to understand the root and get past a lot of the surface stuff. It's not about money. It's not about having fun. What is really going on? What is that pain point? And eventually they uncovered it, and it was succession planning. See, this agent was looking to retire in the next 3 to 5 years, and their existing broker told them that they could not help them with that. They would not be able to help them find a protege to eventually take over the business. They would not be able to help them value their book of business, which was substantial, like 25, 30 million. They wouldn't be able to help them with any of that. So the manager brought this to me and said, here's what they want. What do we do? I said, well, we give it to them. So we got together, we put together some succession planning resources and said, great, you want succession planning? We have it. Here it is. Show it to you. Needless to say, that manager was able to recruit that agent that day. Done. And the reason that happened is because the agent had already emotionally bought in. We gave them the logic. Had the existing broker, okay, that this agent was with, had that prior broker said, I don't know how to succession plan, I don't know what to do with this, but I will figure it out and I will get it to you, the agent never would have left. There never would have been anything to happen because they couldn't have got this stuff on board. But because the agent had made this decision because they had been told no, that's where the emotion was, is they were told no by their broker and they didn't like it. That's why they left. So all of a sudden, we show them how, but the managers shows them how they're going to do all this stuff and all the things they got and the resources and whatever, but really just honed in on this succession planning thing. And that made all the difference. The agent made the move that day. End of story. Done. So next week, we're going to be talking about recruiting, how to use all of this same stuff we talked about in retention, under promise, over deliver, keep your promises, track your conversations, remember their pain points. That's the retention piece. Next week, we're going to dive into recruiting. How do you use all this stuff to recruit, to get more agents to your company? But you got to retain your agents first. It's most important. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all next week for another Thought Thursday.
This was the Philip Gagnon Show. Be sure to visit us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Philip Gagnon Show and join in on the conversation, access the show notes, and discover some fantastic bonus content. The Philip Gagnon Show.